Welcome to Mentor. I'm Rachel Ford.
And I'm Marco Bertozzi.
We are the founders of TheZoo.London Consultant Collective, an executive search business. And our podcast is all about sharing hard-earned wisdom from world-class leaders, from those who have been there, done it, and they are here to guide you. Insights that you won't find in a business book, will you, Marco?
You are not.
But you can use them in your everyday life. And today we have Bruce Daisley coming up. He is a best-selling author on the workplace, an ex-VP from Google and Twitter. And he's shared so much. And a good friend. We had a good laugh. We actually had a good laugh, didn't we?
We did.
And he's got so much wisdom.
There was so much packed in there. I'm trying to sort of filter it out. But I think, one of the things at the end around resilience was interesting.
Yeah.
And this concept that if someone's asking you in the workplace to be resilient, that probably means they're asking you to shut up, which...
Shut up and put up. Yeah,
but
he's not advocating that.
His focus on that actually was about how resilience can be built collectively. So
yeah, no, it's
hear
good.
More about that.
Yeah, there's also some top tips on there in terms of how to bring the joy back to work. Joy every day, us two, aren't we, Marco? And actually, at the very beginning, he talks about how he stood out. I mean, we've got some good lessons about how you stand out to get your CV to the top of the pile. So stay tuned. Hey, Marco, when you think of a great mentor, what words come to your mind?
I think smart, definitely supportive, obviously wise and experienced for sure.
Yeah, I think the same really. And, someone knowledgeable who pushes your ideas beyond your first ideas.
That's why we chose Viral Tribe, because they've helped us on our podcasting journey.
Yeah, you could say they've been our podcasting mentors, couldn't you?
They
have been our ultimate support system, helping us with creative ideas, production. And with state-of-the-art studios like we're in today in the heart of Soho, London, they're not just brilliant at what they do, but they make the whole process seamless and stress-free.
And they work with some of the biggest creators, producers and brands, making everything from chart-topping shows to branded entertainment.
So if you're thinking about launching a video, an audio, a live podcast, make Viral Tribe your podcasting mentor.
Drop them a line at hello@viraltribe.co.uk, and if you quote mentor, they'll give you 20% off your first 3 bookings.
So what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Our guest today, Bruce Daisley, is one of the UK's most influential voices on fixing work and is recognised as one of the world's top 10 voices on the future of work by LinkedIn. Bruce is widely published in titles like The Washington Post, Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal and The Guardian. His latest book, Fortitude, was described by the Financial Times as the best business book of the year.
Wow,
2022. Previously, he spent over a decade running Twitter. We'll come on to that later. And YouTube, and then latter at Google. For Europe, leaving Twitter as its most senior leader outside the US. Bruce runs the Apple #1 business chart topping podcast. Well, second to ours, isn't it? The chart topping podcast, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, on work culture. So we're so lucky to have you today, Bruce. Welcome to our little studio.
Bruce.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yes. It's so nice to have Bruce because, we haven't seen each other for a while. So it
took us a while in the green room before this, didn't it?
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think we like to use the word legend. I think
we don't use it lightly.
We don't use it lightly. I mean, every podcast basically, but
we have had quite a few legends.
All the ones I've listened
to. But no. So Bruce, very grateful for you being here today. Now, we always like to start the podcast with career in 60 seconds, and I think it's particularly important with yours because you have done very different things and pivoted along the way. So, fire away.
Council Estate Birmingham. I mentioned that just because...
Oh, you were both Brummers, remember?
Right, okay, that's right. You're the posh end, though.
You were quite quick to point out that maybe it wasn't the same end.
Council Estate Birmingham, merely say that because there's far less social mobility now than there was before. left university, tried to get a job for 6 months, drew a cartoon CV of my life, sent it to 50 record companies, got a really lovely response, but no jobs. Thought, next thing I love is radio. Sent it to loads. I got a radio job. I got a job at Capital Radio, a little part of Capital Radio. 4 years there. Then went to EMAP, sort of partly radio, partly magazines for a few years after that. Left EMAP, made redundant from EMAP, and got a job at Google. And I was like, I want to go in and have an impact. And can you have an impact at a place like Google? 4 years at Google. First week asked to work on YouTube. Eventually found myself working on YouTube.
And you definitely did, because I remember I was working, exclusively in digital in those days, and I remember your arrival and how the tone of presentation shifted and became, so much more engaging than the sort of machine.
Yeah. And I guess in sort of recognition of that, Twitter approached me, said, we're going to open an office in London. Would you like to come and run Twitter in London? Just because they'd seen me at an IAB presentation. And, I loved YouTube so much as a product. I was like, well, the only thing I love more is Twitter at the time.
Yeah. Well, we did love it, didn't we?
We did. In the days, it was magical.
Yeah, it was
8 years there. Then around COVID, I left Twitter. I was just exhausted. I was ready to leave, got the opportunity to leave. And I've spent the last 5 years as a speaker consultant about workplace culture. And so I've been thrilled to work with companies like Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, TikTok, Microsoft, and just on how to, that eternal question, how to make your teams better, how to create a better work dynamic.
Yeah. Just one very important question out of all of that, because it does come up a lot. What is your views on creating fancy CVs to try and stand out in the crowd?
Look, my view, the first thing I would advise anyone who is early in their career is try and do what everyone else isn't doing. So the first thing that people do, let's just think about CVs. First thing you do is you go to Google, you search CV, and you normally click on the first link. You go to the first link and you fill it out. And it's no surprise then your CV looks like everyone else's. And there's no shame in doing that. I had a normal CV as well as my cartoon CV. But I think sometimes your job is to stand out to some extent. And that might be that you just think about the way that you get it on someone's radar. We're in an era now where a lot of jobs are AI filtered.
I was going to say, it's all the filter. How do you get a cartoon through an AI filter?
So the first thing I would say there is I can guarantee I can land something on the desk of anyone in Britain by posting it to them. And you just write personal in the top right-hand corner and you can land on anyone's desk. And while I was working at MSM, my dream was to work in radio production, work on the sort of Greg James radio show as well. And I ended up by sending 3 pieces of mail for 3 consecutive days to the controller of Radio 1, ended up sitting in the office of the controller of Radio 1. So, you can have an impact, you can reach people, and the question is what you do once you get there. But I'm not saying that you just do something for the sake of razzmatazz, but getting someone's attention, making you seem three-dimensional, making you seem like you're the sort of person that people root for. My cartoon CV at Capital Radio went round the office. Let me tell you, it was rubbish. It's like...
can you draw?
I'm a Beano-style cartoon trip.
I've got
Hopefully.
But Beano-style cartoon strip I can draw. And it's okay, but, I couldn't draw on demand. If you asked me to draw a dog or a cat, I couldn't draw that. But it landed. It wasn't very good. It was excessively long for the amount of experience I had, but it went round the office. And everyone used to say, apparently my interview, I got interviewed by a couple of people I still know, and they said, I tell you were really bad at the interview, but we had 3 jobs, and everyone kept saying, we are employing the cartoon boy, aren't we?
Yeah,
and so I got the job just because of that CV.
Well, you said you stood out, and you showed you got personality, but also I think you showed you've got tenacity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing, is what I'm hearing there is you didn't give up, you saw a goal, you thought, I need to find a way to cut through, and you creatively thought about how to. So you showed your creativeness and tenacity, especially in like an advertising and media industry, but don't give up.
Gary Lineker endorsed my book. I've never met Gary Lineker. He has no reason to care about me. How did he? I wrote my book Fortitude. I wanted national treasures to endorse it, not like business gurus. I wanted Gary Lineker. I wanted, Nadia Hussain. I just wanted to pick a list of people that when you see them, you light up. And so I just I just printed a copy out. On the front cover, I said, I'm dreaming that you would write something like this. And I did it 3 times. I sent it 3 times. And when the 3rd time arrived, someone said, Gary Lineker's pigeonhole's getting a bit full at Match of the Day. We better take it to him. He immediately contacted me going, I am so sorry. I've only just noticed this. What can I do to help you?
Wow.
And he said, I'm flying to the Champions League final right now. I said, well, take it with you. I'm looking for some sort of endorsement. Look, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's precisely the same.
So did you send him the book?
I did. I sent him the book with. I printed the whole book out. I put a little note. I called out several chapters that I said, this really reminds me of what you said.
Well, it's all
on
about teamwork, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
because
that's
we
right.
will come back to Fortitude, and the resilience is not built as a single, like on your own. It's built as a team. But oh my God, you've given me an idea. Gary Lineker for the series 3 of the podcast. Yeah. Why not?
Why not?
I think he lives in Wimbledon. No, Barnes.
Tim Greatrex, that some of us know, was my first boss. And to this day, he still recalls the fact that I sent a fax on my dad's restaurant headed paper every day for about 2 weeks because I thought it wasn't going through, but it was going through with my CV. Right. So I faxed my CV, obviously shows my age, but it's faxing my CV every day. He still remembers it, and that's how I got the first interview.
The thing I sent to Radio 1, I was sort of 25. I was working at Capital Radio in ad sales. Hadn't necessarily imagined I wanted to go into ad sales. First day, I sent DJ vinyl.
Yeah.
That arrived for the controller of Radio 1. Said the best new release of the year is coming in 2 days. The next day, I sent something else. The third day, I sent basically the same cartoon CV format, but in a CD box. It was that time, and it was like a whole CV. And he contacted me. He phoned me. He said, come and see me. The heartbreak of this story is that I arranged to go and see him the following week. He was sick. His PA moved it 3 months away. And so when I eventually got inside his office, he couldn't remember it. That's what happens.
Do you know what about another book? How to get a job.
Yeah, well, use the postal system.
Faxing. Let's go back to faxing.
I'm telling you, we've all had office jobs where you get 0 mail, 0 post. You send something, I would put a balloon in a box, because their balloon is going to be taken immediately. A big box can be taken to their desk, and I would have a helium balloon with something at the bottom of it. That's what I would do. You can get anyone's attention. It might be if you're a kid looking for a job, I would send a few Polaroids of me making cups of tea. Saying, look,
I'm very happy to be the tea person,
But what you're doing, you turn yourself into someone who they can root for. And at the very least, they might say, let's have a chat.
Yeah.
That's what I would do personally.
And it's just, especially in the world of AI, like you say, because so many people are just getting filtered out. There's a lack of everything. And also because people write their CVs in the same way, everything's incredibly vanilla. Nobody is really standing out, are they?
When I asked that question about the CV, I didn't expect.
Well, I know this is
20 minutes.
I know, but listen, this is all about advice,
it's useful.
Especially people entering the industry. Like, how do you stand out? But okay, go on. No, you were going to say.
I could run my life 50 times. I wouldn't have been as fortunate as I am here. There's so much luck along the way. There's so many sort of
serendipity as well.
Yeah, you're just lucky that you land it. But that's it. You've got to try those things.
Make your own luck, as they
that's
say.
right. Gary Lineker did it. Jurgen Klopp never replied to me. I sent 3 to him. Idris Elba never replied to me. I hand-delivered a copy to Idris Elba's wine bar that was opening that night. He said, Idris has asked me to that you hand this to him the moment he arrives. They said, OK, I'll put it over here.
Well, this is it. You didn't give up. This is it. Out of every success, there's 10 failures.
We've got a strategy day coming up. We'll have to...
we'll have to think about how we're going to cut through. But so, OK, then maybe then to bring it back to some of your career. So obviously, like from traditional, more classic media companies like EMAP, and there's so much talent came through that company, didn't they? But obviously then you went to Google. You've absolutely found your home in YouTube. I can imagine you're definitely more a video than a search person. But then going through to Twitter, obviously quite different environments and different ways of managing teams and performance. Are there particular ways that you look back at those of different? What were the different lessons you learned, and then you took it on to the next job, or you just had what were the different things as you went across your career?
What I learned, the part of Capital Radio I learned was chaotic. It was like the local radio sales. It was sometimes called the faulty towers of media. So much went wrong.
Sounds fun.
We had like big 3-month campaigns that on the last day of the campaign, someone from Radio City Liverpool would phone up and say, still not got the ad for this.
Oh, no.
You're like, oh my, right, it's chaotic. No. But the thing I learned from that was, having a good culture was transformational. So we had the best culture, actually, despite the bosses at times. There were a couple of bosses who were brilliant, but best culture despite the bosses. But it really taught me there were other people we knew in radio, whether they were working at Classic FM at the time separate, or whether they were working at IRS and other radio sales. Same industry. They hated going to work. They hated everything about it. So it taught you it's not just the industry, it's about the sort of cohesion of the people there. And that lesson has been with me throughout. So when I went to Google, we actually made quite a separate YouTube culture. We built like a special different YouTube culture. But when I went, and it was countercultural a bit, but when I went to Twitter, it was just like the only question I had was, what's the culture like? Can I contribute to building the culture? And so that is just the through line for everything. For me, I love laughing every day.
Yeah.
And so if a day at work where it might be stressful, and let me tell you, there's nothing more stressful than Twitter. It's it didn't achieve its goals at times. But if we'd gone home, and despite it being mad stressful, if we'd laughed 12 times, I'd be like, that's a good day today.
Because I always say, like, laughing, like, in the face of adversity, laugh. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to, like, it gets you through. And that, I bet, comes into that team spirit. We're all in this together.
That's right.
Yeah, we're all under the cosh. It's really tough. Because I think right now, the world is incredibly tough. But the more we can support each other and, like you say, have a bit of a laugh.
We set out to do that with our business, didn't we? We said we were going to enjoy doing this.
Try our very best to enjoy it.
And I guess you grew with confidence as you progressed and got more, like it sounds like cultures are clearly as it has been, for your current profession, but you obviously, as you got to somewhere like Twitter, you were probably like, the culture is the thing that is going to get me to come here, whether I build it or it exists or whatever, but that's a sort of non-negotiable for you in some way.
Yeah, by the time I got to Twitter, I'll be honest with you, I presumed every year I was going to get fired.
Yeah.
And for a couple of reasons. Look, by the time I'd reached my third year there, every single person, other than one senior boss who'd worked with us, had been fired. The guy who ran US had been fired. The guy who ran Japan had been fired. Everyone had been fired. And so you work on the basis, I'm going to be fired.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't take it personally. But then what forms your opinion is like, if I'm going to get fired, I want to make sure I'm fired being proud that I did the right thing. Yeah. So the best thing I did there, when we first started, chaotic, crazy, very demanding, my philosophy was these people are trying their best, and if they get into trouble, I want them to know I've got their back. And actually that's the sort of, people often talk about psychological safety. It's just the idea that someone's got your back. And so we had a philosophy, blame Bruce. If you get in trouble for anything, blame Bruce. And it saves them so much time every day that, the marketing stuff we did was dazzling. A couple of people who did it for us, they did the best work of their lives.
Yeah.
Because I think they knew, well, this is pushing their brand guidelines, within the brand guidelines, but it's really eye-catching, it's really fun, it's really memorable. And they knew that if anything went wrong, they had someone they could blame for it. And it just, that sense of feeling enabled to do your best work meant that I had nothing to do with that work, but the environment enabled people to sort of do their best in it.
But that's a bit like you're giving them permission, aren't you, to, like you say, to push those boundaries. And almost it's a bit like when you talk about like failure and you learn through your failures, you're almost like saying, look, I'm going to give you permission to push that. And if it fails, then you can blame me. Therefore, you just, psychological safety.
I thought I was going to be fired anyway, so it was like, well, I'd rather go down.
What's the worst that can happen?
This sort of, and we'll come on to where this sort of progresses to, but I mean, it triggers me a bit because at Spotify, I think I was always...
They always blamed Marco. Anyway.
Very focused on the team. Well, rightly so. But I pushed back a lot on my US boss at the time because, they were coming up with stuff that didn't make any sense. And so you do a lot of pushing back. And that's to your point, isn't it, about, you're going to get fired at some point because Americans don't like being pushed back on that much. But there is a fine line, isn't there? I'm trying to think about advice I'd give someone with hindsight is that balance of you can't die on every hill and you've got to pick your battles a bit, haven't you? Because otherwise you will get fired really quickly. And how did you cope with that sort of...
So for example, I'll give you one issue, like social media. Everyone perceive social media as being prickly, a bit of a cesspool, a cesspit. It's like it's got a lot of toxicity to it. And we used to see that in the UK way before anywhere else. Right. So football fans are a bit more adversarial in England and Scotland. Politics was especially around the India referendum onwards in Scotland, it was more toxic. And so we were seeing, threats to MPs, we were seeing horrible stuff to MPs. And my view was, I'm advocating for Twitter users. I'm not just going to toe the company line. I had a bit of a ding-dong with someone who works at a major social media company last week because these people just turn up, say the company line and don't seem to care about the people who use their product. So my view was, I'm going to advocate for this. Someone came up to me when I've been at Twitter for about year and a half, 2 years. They said, I just wanted to come over and shake your hand. And I said, why? He said, I sit next to the chief exec, a guy called Dick Costello at the time. He said, and the amount of times I've heard him go, fucking Bruce Daisley. I wanted to come and meet fucking Bruce Daisley. I was like, okay, well, I'm still here. But that was my philosophy on it. It reached a point, though, exactly to your point, reached a point about 4 years in, the culture had been cracking. Absolutely, the best work was coming out of London office, famous culture. Then we did a round of job cuts, and what you find there is that we did 2 rounds of job cuts in 12 months, and the culture was rock bottom.
To keep it going.
And the US was making bad decisions, and my response to that was, I started my own podcast on workplace culture at that time.
Yes.
And so that was my act of subversion. I wouldn't say anything, but each week I would contact someone who had done research into something that the company was doing at the moment. And I was allowed to do podcasts. I'd check that with someone. There was a few engineers that did podcasts. And I did it entirely in my evenings and my weekends, so there was no way that anyone could say. And it was like my act of pushback without overtly pushing back. So, yeah, I hear you. It's a challenging thing. You can't just be the antagonist.
No. Yeah, and actually social media has always been, the bane of my life. Because I've always been very, as you know, when Twitter was... whatever company I've worked at, I've always been vocal about other businesses, our own business, and there's lots of people who don't like that. And I think in terms of within your company, that get a bit uncomfortable about you being too vocal. And so I think moderating, I think it's important to have a voice, but yeah, you do need to moderate it if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You asked what you think about X now. I mean, it must break your heart a bit, doesn't it?
Funnily, I don't see any emotional attachment. I don't feel like, we, the team I worked on, took it here. But it's horrible. In fact, I've done an interview that will go out around the same time as this with Sky, because they've just done some research. And my mentions... by the time that this comes out, will be horrible. It's an interview because I've done something very specifically about. There was a bit of research that Sky have done that says that the debate and the timelines for people now is filled with right-wing content, and it's not just right-wing content as in let's just have a bit of austerity. No, it's right-wing content like let's platform Tommy Robinson. Let's try and suggest that this sort of Sharia law going on. It's total nonsense. And I think what that guy has done is firstly, it's a waste of a good platform because it makes people feel that social media is innately bad. And to your point, Marco, social media, when it gets it right, can be energising. It can make you feel connected. And actually, you only need to make 2 or 3 tweaks to get it back to that place of connection rather than of antagonism, really.
Yeah, but it's all the algorithms, isn't it? And because there's echo chambers and people just...
But the point I used to make to my bosses in the US is this a place where you can turn up and call a stranger the C word? And I don't think you should.
No.
Really simple.
No.
Because I tell you what, you try that on TikTok, you get banned pretty quickly.
Yeah.
This is not preventing anyone's free speech, but it is saying, we're going to have some rules here. In the same way you can't walk into Wetherspoons, go over to someone, call them names. You shouldn't be able to do it on social media.
Yeah.
And look, the interesting thing about trolls is that they normally don't perceive themselves as the troll. So, for example, when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, a lot of people believed they were entitled to swear at him. And they wouldn't see themselves as the troll. They'd say, well, that's my free speech. I do think he is that. But you tell them the first time, you're not going to be able to do that. They feel a bit annoyed, but they don't do it again. And generally people don't reach three strikes against them because they realise, I need to moderate my my behaviour.
Reminder,
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And do you think for you personally, when you left Twitter, well, it's just turned to X, was it you just thought, this is just too far away from my own, my own values, and actually the joy, and we'll come on to that, the joy of work and the book you wrote about that. But did you lose some of the joy personally? Was that a pivotal time in your career?
Yeah, I never got to the Elon Musk era.
Yeah,
I left before that.
You did, actually.
But what happened was I'd been doing a international global job for about 5 years. Marco knows this well. You're on a plane.
I've got to say, I do remember when you were on a plane, I went, you're the tallest man I know, like you and Dara, in economy, fine for Dara, not so fine for a very tall man.
Sorry, Dara.
No, sorry, Dara. Well, you know what I mean, Dara.
Yeah, but when you're on a plane all the time, and so, really difficult to actually stay in touch with your friends, because mates would say to you, do you fancy a drink next week? I'm in the US next week. The following week I'm in Italy. The next week I am here, but I've got a client dinner on Wednesday and Thursday. And so mates used to say to me, should we just leave it? And what they meant was, should we just leave this friendship? If you're that checked out with this. And I had one mate who said, if you can't be bothered, I can't be bothered. It's like, honestly, truly, it's not that. And I used to carry for the last year and a half, used to carry this little notebook around with how many days left before I resigned. Because I was just like, man, I can't keep doing this. But you teach yourself, if I do another 6 months, if I do another, I didn't own any property at the time, so it was like, if I do another 6 months, I get a deposit on her. And, so you just
get a bit trapped in a way, don't you?
My travel went right into COVID, so I was doing what you're describing for well over a decade. Then COVID hit. It wasn't, to your point, you get brainwashed by the whole thing, because it wasn't until you had to stop, like admittedly an extreme stop, but a stop, that you go, God, how much time was I away? When you actually spend a full month with your kid, with your family, whatever, it's such a realisation of how much time you were travelling. And you get into that, you get on that wheel, don't you? It's hard to get off.
Yeah, no doubt. I've also got something definitely broken in me. When I was a kid, one of my parents was quite sick. And so what that formed in me was this. My mum ended up doing 4 or 5 jobs. And so what formed in me is this horrible belief that if I work harder, I can fix problems. And so I'd be on those planes and I would take a stack of stuff I needed to read. I would work. The people who do those jobs well, they turn up, they get a box set on, they get themselves a drink, and they chill. And you watch them going, shout out to those people.
And they often add a day on
They add a day. They
play golf.
Whereas I would turn up with a pile of stuff. I would clear my inbox. I would, and it was just, I don't think you can do it in that way and sustain it. No. So I reached the point where I was like, man, I've got to get out of this. And so it was.
So the joy of work was that was a kind of, obviously it was bubbling, it was coming natural to you. Did you sort of trip over it, or was it like, right, I'm going to
I started a podcast probably about 8 years ago, and it was big time that podcasts were just starting. Yeah. And so I got Apple to promote it, and the week I got Apple to promote it, it became number one. Business podcast, like number 8 on the main charts. And so Penguin approached me, said, would you turn this into a book? No plan to turn it into a book. But immediately I thought, I don't want to work at Facebook. I don't want to go back to Google. So there's no obvious next jobs for me. And I was like, well, if I get a book out, books are sort of quite a good positioning thing for you. If I get a book out, then so I'll do that. So I spent, again, very careful that no one could say I was doing it in work time, as I used to spend every Tuesday night, every Saturday morning writing, and I published that book. So the book came out while I was still at Twitter. It sort of gave me a jumping off point.
You did a bit of a tour. I mean, I remember you doing a bit of a tour when you were still at Twitter, because you came into Spotify when I was there and you did a presentation.
That. Took a week off, did all of that.
Did you not get shit for that from the company? Did they not go, hold on a minute?
So I observed what other people were doing inside the company. So I took time off to do that book tour. Right. If anyone is interested, I've written like a little PDF of everything I learned about writing a book. Because a lot of people think, I'll write a book, it'll help me. And these little things I did. First thing, if you can open the Sunday Times at the weekend, you can see how many copies books sell to get in the charts. Right. So I saw, to get in the the business charts or the hardback bestsellers, you need to sell 1,500 copies.
Yeah.
It's big, but it's not that big.
Yeah.
1,500 copies. I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive 1,500 sales. And so if Spotify contacted me, I say, I'll come for free, tell me when, but you got to buy 60 copies. Right, 60 on my list.
Right.
You know,
Brilliant.
and basically you just tick it off. And I treated it like another bit of work.
Yeah.
And so I got to the end of the period and I'd sold 3,500 copies for release week. So it becomes
brilliant.
a Sunday Times bestseller.
This is a masterclass, isn't
Honestly.
it?
We'll put it. Is that a link we can put somewhere?
Yeah.
I'll give it to
Send
you
it
in
to us.
the show
We'll
notes.
put it in.
And you, as you were writing that book, anything surprised you about the joy of what? Like you, obviously, you've very strongly culture led, laugh every day. But as you researched it, did anything bubble up that surprised you?
What a lot of it is stringing stuff together. So like you're like, oh yeah, I've seen that go wrong in real life. I watched that go wrong. That's why that doesn't work. And you know, quite often, the people who become managers become critical parents. They become they either mimic their own parent style or they mimic how they parent themselves because they believe they could do it better themselves. And that criticism, it's understandable, but it just creates really bad environments. Or I worked somewhere really badly it was going, and someone said, "Don't be seen laughing right now." And so, look, I can understand it because he thought our boss was one of those people that when things were going badly, he'd summon you in. We're going to have our 9 o'clock meeting at 7 a.m. on Monday, controlling behaviour. So we all have to chaos as everyone puts the maddest childcare in place to try and get into the office for 7 a.m.
It's all control, isn't
all
it?
Control.
All control.
And you're just like, yeah, that's not how you actually
That would
motivate.
piss me off so
Yeah, of course
badly.
it would. Of course it would. And so you've got people struggling in, and there's a couple of them who arrive at 7:03 and the meeting room's locked.
God.
It's like chaos,
Oh my
control.
God.
This is not the way how to make people feel like we're all in it together.
Yeah.
If the secret of great teams is we're all in it together, we're part of something together, doing that is not the answer.
Oh God, I'm glad
I can't even imagine. Like
I'll name names.
that must have been
yeah, we won't.
that must have been a hard one to make because that would be a classic example where I wouldn't be able to keep my mouth shut, and I'd be like,
Well, that's just
that's
psychotic,
tough.
almost psychotic.
Yeah.
But I suppose like that's very clear that that's not the way
That's
to
a
run.
no.
That's a no. But also, have you seen some mistakes that leaders have made when they have tried to create positive culture? I remember that when we were at Publicis or at Zenith, we'd say, look, what day are we going to do forced fun? And sometimes you kind of have to, because people don't really want to go out.
You had
and
that
then,
whole Friday thing, didn't you? It was the Friday where you were
Friday,
gone.
or the drinks, the trolley or whatever, obviously, or the yoga mats. I don't know, because obviously everybody wants to create a positive culture, but have you got some kind of like watch outs? Like, don't, maybe inauthentic, forced fun.
I sometimes see that as the smoothie delusion because you go somewhere and they say, we've put breakfast on for people on Mondays and Fridays to get them in on those days. We've given everyone smoothies and yoga mats, like you say, and you can't bribe your way to better culture. Like if people don't feel part of something, they don't feel that the identity of the company represents them or the identity. Quite often, culture starts with your team. You can be sitting somewhere. Media is a good example. You can be sitting somewhere and you can look over at that team and think, I wouldn't give anything to be in that. I don't want to be there. Whereas our team here, we've got it going on. And, quite often good culture can just live and die in teams. And that's what I'm always inspired by, because even if you can't change your company, you can definitely make the culture of your team better.
Yeah.
Isn't that even hard? I mean, that's the problem now with, and you were always a big advocate for the, flexible working, all that stuff in the early days of it. But isn't that the problem now with people being out of working from home more? It's obviously that little trend is reversing a little bit, but people working from home more. Everything has to be built around it's a gathering, it's a smoothie, it's because that's the problem. You're trying to find those connection points to build the cultures. So how do you look at that now? What's your advice for a company now who's balancing flexible working in terms of location and building that culture?
Yeah.
Like, what was your tips for
Look,
someone
you're exactly right. Normally, good cultures, people want to socialise with each other. There's a strong cohesion. Some face-to-face time seems to be transformational. I think face-to-face time generally scales with company size. So if you've got, I bet you guys see each other once a week or whatever, and maybe more twice a week.
Yeah.
Okay, but a lot of small businesses, they see each other once a week, and actually that sort of tops their bucket up, and they've got enough connection from that. Whereas other businesses that there's 1,000 people, 3 days is more likely because there's just so many people to stay connected with.
Yeah.
But the idea that you need to be around each other every day, I think.
Feels like that's gone, actually.
It's gone.
I think there's evidence to say
Yeah.
it's not building culture in the way.
Yeah, I saw a brilliant thing, which is Shonda Rhimes is like the Charles Dickens of American dramatic TV. Bridgerton, had to get away, murder scandal, and she did this brilliant commencement speech where she said, "Every time you see me succeeding, you might see me on the set of Grey's Anatomy saying goodbye to Sandra Oh, or on stage at the Emmys collecting an award. Every time you see me succeeding, I'm failing somewhere you can't see," and that's true. She said, I missed my daughter's soccer final. I wasn't at my mum's birthday because it was that. And she says, these constant trade-offs. And for someone like that to say it, then you go, yeah, we are constantly trading stuff off. And I think people realise I'm willing to give up something to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. But the idea that I have to be in 5 days a week to prove that I want it, I just don't think is a reasonable trade-off. I can be good at my job, but still work from home on Monday. I don't necessarily have to trade those things off. And I think that's what COVID taught us. It was like, it's not a loyalty test that people need to go through or sort of deserve to be pushed through. Just because you're there at Monday morning at 7 a.m. doesn't mean you care more than someone who's...
I think that was all the presenteeism. It's that actually you could come and sit behind your desk 5 days and look productive.
Yeah. Nailing the Daily Mail website.
This is it, playing whatever, some solitaire on the screen. But actually that's what COVID taught us, that actually productivity went through the roof when everybody actually didn't have the distractions. But you need the distractions because you need those connections, you need that serendipity, you need those making coffee moments where it's a conversation that you might not necessarily have within your team. But it's interesting when you talk about that, the trade-offs, because when people talk about the work-life balance, it really is a constant juggle. And when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Right. And I think as long as you then are, you can reconcile that in your own head, it's very difficult to have it all. Life is a bit of a series of compromises, but you just need to make sure what you absolute have to do versus being a bit more flexible around
That's right.
it.
And there's nothing more dispiriting. If you live in... I'm obsessed with the price of trains from everywhere.
Yes.
Croydon, return to London is 15 quid. So most people now are the younger workers in offices don't live in Zone 2 anymore. No. They don't live in your first flat that you had in Kensington or Kentish Town, Camden. They don't live... They live way out of town now. 15 quid to get into town now. And so if you spend 15 quid coming into town and all you do is sit on Zoom calls all day...
Well, exactly.
It's fair enough that person might say, I'm not sure that was worth that.
Yeah.
Because actually they're 30 quid in the hole once you're doing a sandwich, once money's disappeared in boots. You're 30 quid in the hole. That's before you've gone to the pub. And so as a result, you can understand why people think, if all I'm going to do is sit on back-to-back Teams calls all day, I don't think I need to be in the office 5 days a week.
And I think that's true because also we'll come back to maybe the fortitude and building resilience as a team. If you're in a team and half your teammates are dialing in and you're sat in the office, you go, well, what was the point me coming in? Then the resent keeps, well, why can they work from home but I'm here? And so it's having more of a purpose, isn't it, around the office. So when I was a CEO, we used to do team days. So on that day, there was so all Zoom calls were taken out of the diary. We had smoothies and yoga mats, and then the drinks trolley came out for. No, but it's having a purpose and knowing that you are all in this together and you're going to turn up together. But the problem is, as soon as one person doesn't dial in, you just think, well, why am I bothering?
Yeah.
Why am I bothering? And there is that, which is, we can see why some officers have just said, look, we're going to enforce it because we need the majority in. But, you're never going to get 100% of the people, are you? But you just need, it's like the detractors of those, you need as more people as in the positive bit, but you're always going to get some detractors and they're always going to wing it. They might be there, they might not do any work. So you've got to kind of
Yeah,
balance it, I suppose.
there's no simple answer to it.
No.
Beware simple answers to complicated
Yeah.
problems. But moving in the direction where the teams understand why the days they're in the office they're in the office, that there seems to be an uplift of
There's a
benefit to them.
purpose, yeah.
There's a bit of fear of missing out. That people say, actually, brilliant day on Wednesday. There was, whether it was food laid on, or there was something happened, or we had a bake sale where people brought stuff in, or we just had a brilliant meeting where everyone got involved. We weren't live streaming it. There were candid questions being asked, but just trying to make sure that the days in the office do feel a bit different to the days at home. But I agree with you. Back-to-back Teams calls, it's one of the most life-sapping things you can subject someone to.
Especially when you don't have rooms and you're probably doing it on the stairs or some back.
Yeah.
Well, I worked with one retailer and they'd demanded 3 days back in the office, but they'd also downscaled their headquarters by 50%. So people were taking Teams calls, sitting in the disabled toilet, they were sitting in the corridor, in the lift well, and then the next thing they did is, we want to flatten the curve. So if you're coming in on Wednesday, come in on Monday. And what you're just doing, what's the point coming in on a day that you don't see any colleagues?
Yeah. No.
It just doesn't make any sense.
No.
You're far better having a rule that says, this team finance will all be in on Monday, guaranteed.
Yeah.
You're going to see each other, you're going to have some of that.
See your own team.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you need to sort of think about what your objective is rather than what the headline is.
Yeah, for sure. And so we are called Mentor. So it's always good to come back to who your mentors have been across your career. So I suppose starting with that one, are there significant people that stick out in your mind that I'm really glad that I got to know them?
I'll tell you, like I say, you could run my life 50 times, I wouldn't achieve anything. But the best person who made me believe, I'm a troublemaker. I'm an outspoken person. But I tell you what, David Mansfield was initially the commercial boss of Capital Radio, and then he became chief exec. But we used to run, because we were in this like chaotic little refugee camp sort of outside of Capital, and he used to turn up once a month. And he'd say, "Ask me anything." And so people used to ask him about, some terrible. What's the strategy for next year? And I used to ask, you just closed that down. Last year you were offered £1 million for it. Is that the worst mistake you've ever made? And he would go, "Let me think of the worst mistakes I've ever made." No, here's one. Anyway, but I was like this angry little kid. He used to love it. And he used to say, when I wasn't there, "Where's that?"
Yeah,
I used to wear glasses.
Yeah.
Where's that? Where's the glasses kid? These questions are terrible. Where's that kid?
Yeah.
And anyway,
You want the provocation.
Still in touch with him now.
Oh.
Regularly, I had like a chat with him 3 weeks ago. When I resigned, he said, "Can I take you to lunch? Can I ask why?" And I was like, "No one." I was no one. It was like, he just wanted to understand. But he was like, that sense of you feel like you matter. But he loved having dissenting voices in the tent. And so I went next to EMAP. And so EMAP were in The Guardian, ran a list of, there were FT 100 company, and EMAP were like the bottom in the list for giving money to charity. So I asked the chief exec there, "Are you not ashamed by that?" Anyway, let me tell you, there's people I could name that we knew who everyone took a step away from. And he reacted, that chief exec, he reacted quite badly to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. Yeah. Although I'm still in touch with him and he's still in contact.
Did he give more money to charity?
They definitely went out. The company sort of got sold about a year later. So, but they definitely made a better job of representing the charity money they were giving.
Right.
So,
but I think I think this good advice and I think it was Kathleen that mentioned something about this as well. It's like, it's good advice for the younger generation to, be seen, be heard, have a voice if you want to stand out.
Yeah.
It's not always a negative. As a boss, I hated the fact that I go, "Has anyone got any questions? You've just presented some, restructure or whatever. Has anyone got any questions?" Not a fucking question. What happens next? They all go off and bitch about you behind your back. I'm like, ask the questions. I would much rather that, and I would give you a proper answer to it than. And so I always your strategy was probably ultimate high risk, throwing it at the CEO. But I still think fair enough question, assuming you said it in a constructive manner. It's like, it's important to do. I think like have a voice. Senior leaders would rather answer constructive questions than have you talk about it behind their back.
Yeah. I sat next to Kathleen, and so we were Kathleen Saxon. We were sort
of course, yes,
at that job.
Yeah.
So we were like, the troublemakers there.
Yeah,
and so, but that's it. And I guess what I was seeing before anyone gave it jargony sort of psychological safety. But what I was showing was that if you can ask difficult questions, I want to work here.
Yes.
And so it became a really big tell for me. I want to work somewhere where someone can ask a question like that and it not be career limiting for them. It not be something where it's, we've got to get them out. And I loved that environment.
Did you find American culture to be more like that than UK culture? Or is it a mixed bag?
That's an interesting question. Broadly, US culture is far more about scale, isn't it? You've got to fit in, you've got to, shut up. Dick Costolo, who was the chief exec at Twitter, I'd reached a position of seniority there where I was very outspoken to Dick Costolo. He was very clear. And probably Jack Dorsey, if you asked him about it, might wince because, I went out of my way to tell them what I was representing the team, I was representing the user. I'd tell them what I was unhappy with. So, I can't imagine that like any of them would say he was the easiest guy to work with. But they both took it.
Because then they'll remember you.
Yeah, I had a boss that if you disagree with him, that was, as far as he was concerned, that was you. You're not on the
career
bus.
Suicide.
You're not on the bus.
Right.
And I think what a shame that you can't take, you can't have a debate about something, you can't discuss things. So again, I do think for people coming up, hopefully people who listen to this podcast come from all levels of, and it's like, don't be afraid to take on board some constructive criticism or some feedback or whatever. Don't see it as a slight.
Yeah.
Have a dialogue about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And look, it's easier said than done, right? A lot of the people who are still at X at Twitter, they're broadly hostages or mercenaries. Like the job market has been so terrible that a lot of them you can't just say I don't like this guy anymore. I want to leave because we've all got rent to pay and bills to pay. Yeah. So it's sometimes easier said than done. I recognise circumstances play a part,
100%.
But that boss who's basically marking you down, thinking you're going to get, I don't want to work for people like that. And if you've got the privilege of being able to choose, then for me that's as big a tell from them as it is vice versa.
I think we are going to be running out of time soon, and I did want to bring it back to resilience, because bloody hell, we all need it right now. And your book, Fortitude, challenges that resilience is something that we build alone. And also, we're a very practical, advice-driven podcast. For leaders today, what advice are the 3 tips you could help them how they would build collective resilience within their teams?
Yeah. Look, I'll keep it simple. The first thing is, I think resilience is the strength we draw from each other. So look, to the point when people are working fully remotely, we had colleagues who lived on their own, in flats on their own, were seeing no one, their whole life was through a screen. Like, it's no wonder they were struggling. They were this really interesting bit of data about the start of the pandemic, and it was the queuing outside Tesco's for some toilet rolls at the start of the pandemic. You'd come home with some pasta shells, and it was like
a metre apart.
Yeah, that's right. You remember that era. But that
hell.
era of the pandemic, children, their resilience went up, not went down. Really interesting, that era of the pandemic. And the woman who looked into it was trying to understand why. And she said, it went up amongst people who are now having an evening meal, children, teenagers, having an evening meal with their families every night. Because, we don't live in that. People come home, they preheat something. They were now sitting down with their siblings, their parents, their carers, and having an evening meal. Resilience is the strength we draw from each other. And sometimes we might, in those cases, the teenagers might not want to draw it, but you get it from each other, being around each other. Right, so that's the first thing I'll tell you about resilience. Second thing is, the biggest predictor for any of us is having autonomy. The reason why people from EMAP went on to do really well is people at the age of 26 were given their own P&L to run. They were given loads of autonomy. They were given the ability to fail. And most of modern work robs us of any control, any autonomy. So you feel like you've got your calendars back to back, you don't decide it. A meeting's just gone in. When am I meant to do this meeting? Your inbox is full of requests. Clients are being incredibly demanding, and it produces that breathlessness in it. So, gifting any degree of autonomy to people normally makes them feel like they've got a bit of agency over their lives. They can get things done. If I was going to summarise it, they're the big couple of things, really.
No, that's good advice.
And why did you? So, just going back to the start on that, why did you? What inspired you to write that? Like, where did that sort of
I'd done one
from?
book about work,
Yeah,
and then I was leaving Twitter about that stage. I was like, I am going to write another book. Books are sort of an interesting thing. It's a calling card. It's an invitation to connect. But they don't. You're much more likely. You'll get way more views on some of your content online than you will readers for a book. So it's interesting how we see a hierarchy of things being better or worse. I think what you're doing is way more impactful, for example, than a book. But I wanted to write a book on it. I was really intrigued about the idea of resilience, because a lot of people feel you're often told to be resilient, and it's like this unsympathetic request. It's like loads of bad stuff. I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine, her mum was unwell. She was really struggling financially, and her boss sent her on a resilience course. And it was kind of like her boss, and work wasn't going well. And it was kind of like her boss saying to her, you need to stop chatting about all this stuff and get on with your job. And it was like, I saw a tweet somewhere that said, requests for resilience are requests for silence. It's asking you to shut up.
Just cope with it.
Shut up and get on with it. I was really interested. Like, that's an interesting perspective. Because quite often, the communities in the US who are told to be resilient, the communities that have had the hardest time. The Flint, Michigan, the water problem they had for years, they were told they needed to be more resilient. It's like, okay, you're just asking us to deal with something really toxic and get on with it. Anyway, I was interested in that, and what you find is that there's a whole strand of resilience which is all about teaching individuals how to be resilient. And the great thing about it is, because people have created these methodologies, one of the most famous psychologists in the world created them, other people have come along and measured it and said, oh, by the way, none of that works. But if your firm is running a resilience training course, I guarantee it is based on this guy's unproven work. The US Army spent $1 billion training people to do this. And the great thing is, when someone spends $1 billion, other researchers come along and say, let's measure if that works. And they said it had no effect whatsoever. God. So you've got all of this, and it's because you're looking for individual resilience. You're looking for a switch where people can reframe these personal tragedies. Oh, it's not a personal tragedy. My wife died when the bees escaped from the honey factory and killed her. Like, that's not a personal tragedy. It's an opportunity for me to no, that's just, it's toxic. It's trying to reframe something really bad. And so actually seeing resilience as, when you see resilience, it's always this community has pulled together and done this. The way they responded to this was they all emboldened each other. If you see, like, after natural disasters, you hear about, like, when there was the tube bombings in London. No one in London, we make it a pride of never talking to each other. People helping each other, carrying strangers. This collective response. We drew strength from each other. And it's right in front of us, but sometimes it suits people not to point that out. So I was just interested in that, really.
Fantastic.
And then I suppose then to bring resilience and joy together, because I think a lot of our listeners are feeling pretty burnt out, pretty knackered, maybe a little bit disillusioned. Is there some advice, like how to try and find some joy again?
It's really interesting thing. If you look into the stats, the number one predictor of whether you like your job isn't like whether you believe the strategy of the company. It's not whether, like, you buy into the 5-year plan. It's really simple, soft. It's, do you have a best friend at work? Right. It's like,
I've got a best friend at work.
Right.
Who is it?
The interesting thing about that, right? So that best friend, a lot of men see that. And they go, best friend? I've not had a best friend since I was 6. And, it's because, exactly to that point, if I turn to Marco and say, you're my best friend, and he says, oh, I sort of think,
well, that's nice.
What do you want?
The second biggest predictor of whether you're engaged by your job is whether you've had direct feedback from a boss that week. And both of them, for a long time, I was like, get both those. But it was only this year I read a book. It's called The Power of Mattering. And it was like, this idea of mattering is that, am I significant and important to someone else? And both of them are about that. And most of us, when we feel our work is we're burnt out by it. We've spent ages doing a report, and we're pretty sure no one opened that report. We're pretty sure no one read that thing that we did. We're pretty sure that our work wasn't noticed. We worked all weekend, and no one said thank you. No one did. And that, if you're going to boil it down to the first thing, knowing that the work you do matters. Look, it's a hard job for a boss to give feedback, real feedback to everyone in their team. So to some extent, you've got to think about, so how do we create a climate of that where we give feedback to each other?
Fast feedback. You like fast feedback, don't you?
Speedback.
Oh, speedback.
Speedback.
Right. But,
I thought you were about to say, don't fucking do
No, I
that.
like
That's
it.
the worst thing you do.
It's feedback, not right.
No, it's good.
No, it's
well
good.
into
That's
it.
good, Marco.
If you tell someone, look, the funny thing is, if you think back to bosses you've had, I think I've heard you say it on a podcast, Marco, but when you think back to bosses you've had, they're not just nice to you all the time. Sometimes the bosses you respect the most will come and tell you straight,
that's the thing.
What you've done wrong. But and we've watched it on Gordon Ramsay at times, where the clip is yelling in people's faces. But I tell you, people love it when he praises them because they've seen the yin yang. They've seen. I'm not advocating yelling in people's faces, but you can see why both of them serve to make people feel like the work they do matters and is noticed, and so it creates an aspiration for
and
high
often
standards.
you want to make them better.
That's right.
Like in your view, you want to make them better, and if you save up 20 little things and present them all back at some sort of review or whatever, then it becomes a big thing. Whereas just saying, hey, don't spit on the floor in that presentation, it's not ideal. At least they know that straight away and they won't do it again, and you move on.
That's right.
Not a good
rather
example.
but rather than it building, no, it's not a good example at all.
I don't know why that's the only thing I could think of.
Maybe change the word on that presentation to say the right clown rather than the wrong client, because that can be done. Sales presentations where it's generic and they've got the old client there. Maybe that would have been a good piece of feedback. But spitting on the. But I think it goes back to, and I think we're all human. We all want to make a difference. Isn't it? That's the thing about it. We want to feel like it matters. And I actually think we're out of time. I'm looking. I think we are.
Good.
It's a shame. The thing is that we've got a Brucey bonus, hopefully, episode that will be coming up that we're going to record live this afternoon. But it's just really for us to say, Bruce, thank you. You've reminded us about bringing the joy back into our work, and actually, it's what makes us all human and joins us together as people, doesn't it? So thank you very much, Bruce.
I'm very grateful.
Fabulous.
Thank you, Bruce.
That was fabulous.
So that's all we've got time for.
Oh, no.
That was a good.
Yeah, it was a good one.
It was a good chat.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Please make sure we're really getting into the commercial side of things now. Please make sure to subscribe.
Yes.
Like. Share. I don't know how many other things are on.
Yeah, if you enjoy this conversation, share it with someone else navigating their own leadership path. And if you need a little more wisdom in your business, then be sure to come to TheZoo.London for exec search and consulting support.
Definitely. Don't forget, we do love to hear about your mentors. So drop us a line on our socials. And a big thanks to Viral Tribe, who are producers of Mentor and indeed our mentor for this programme.
Thank you, Viral Tribe Entertainment Production. And don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Join us for next time for more pearls of wisdom from Mentor.
Thank you.
Thank you.